Elias Rourke had always believed the silence of the desert was his only true companion, a vast and lonely stillness that matched the hollow places inside him. But everything changed the morning he rode out after a strayed Mustang and found himself surrounded by swift, painted riders whose eyes flashed like desert lightning, the Apache women's tribe known as the Daughters of the Dawn, who moved with such grace and certainty that he barely felt the ground leave beneath him as they pulled him from his saddle and tied his hands with soft braided rope. He expected harshness, expected cruelty, expected the punishment a trespassing rancher might deserve, yet what he encountered instead was a world shaped entirely by the fierce dignity and quiet strength of women who had learned to survive in a land that demanded resilience, unity, and heart. They brought him into their hidden valley, lush green threaded with silver creeks and warm springs, a sanctuary carved between sunburned cliffs, and though Elias braced for hostility, he was met instead with curious glances, smothered laughter, and the kind of guarded interest people have when meeting something unusual. After all, he was the first outsider to stumble upon them in nearly a decade. The tribe's chief, Ahalani, carried herself with the presence of a queen whose crown was woven by the wind itself, tall, sharp-eyed, strong enough to break a horse and gentle enough to soothe one, and she regarded Elias not as a threat but as a puzzle, asking him through narrowed eyes why a man with no family, no tribe, and no close companions wandered the desert alone, and when he couldn't answer, she nodded as if she already understood. Loneliness was a language she recognized. In the days that followed, Elias expected interrogation or confinement, but instead he was given tasks simple at first, gathering firewood, carrying water, sorting herbs, and though the younger women teased him for his clumsy attempts, the laughter was never cruel. In fact, he found himself smiling back, a feeling so unfamiliar it startled him. He watched the tribe live in harmony, each woman holding a place shaped by skill rather than hierarchy. Some were hunters, some healers, some weavers, some fierce protectors, and many were all four at once. Their unity reminded him of something he had long forgotten, a sense of belonging, of being seen, of being valued simply for existing. He grew especially close to Naira, a quiet healer with eyes full of storms and stories she rarely shared, who taught him how to identify desert roots by smell and how to listen to the land instead of fighting against it. She said little at first, but her small smiles came easier each day, and Elias found himself lingering by the fireside longer than he should, listening to her speak about traditions, songs, and the deep ache of losing family during a hard winter years ago. Yet the tribe's acceptance was not without tension. Some of the older women distrusted him, remembering raids, broken treaties, and countless betrayals by outsiders, but even their suspicion began to soften as Elias showed again and again that he carried no malice, only a bruised heart trying to find something worth holding on to. The turning point came the morning a boulder slide crushed part of the valley's lower path, trapping two young girls on the wrong side of a rising creek. The tribe panicked, for the current grew stronger with every heartbeat, and no one could reach them in time, no one except Elias, who without thinking sprinted across the ridge, leapt from rock to rock, and waded into the freezing torrent until his muscles screamed, hoisting the girls onto his shoulders and fighting the water step by step until he finally staggered back to safety with both children clinging to him. The entire tribe watched in stunned silence before erupting in cries of relief, and Ahalani touched his shoulder with a reverence that startled him, whispering that courage like his could not be faked, bought, or borrowed. From that moment on, everything shifted. The tribe no longer spoke of him as a captive but as an unexpected blessing, an outsider whose heart beat with the same rhythm as theirs, and though Elias had done the rescue without seeking reward, he suddenly found himself overwhelmed by gestures of gratitude, warm meals prepared with extra care, woven bracelets left at his sleeping mat, songs sung in his honor, and more warm smiles than he had seen in his entire life. But what surprised him most was how deeply he cared for them in return. Every small kindness, every shared story, every night spent listening to flutes echo off canyon walls loosened the tight knots of grief he had carried for years, grief for a mother lost too young, a father who drank himself into silence, and a ranch that was more coffin than home. Slowly, gently, he felt himself healing in ways he had never believed possible. Yet the greatest test came when a drought struck the valley, withering crops and drying the creeks until even the strongest women grew weary. The tribe faced the very real possibility of abandoning their sanctuary, scattering across unfamiliar territory, and risking everything to survive. Elias watched their worry grow, saw Ahalani hide her exhaustion behind a mask of calm leadership, and he realized with a sudden, painful clarity that he could not simply stand by while the people who had shown him more kindness in weeks than he had known in years suffered. So one evening, as the sun bled into the canyon in shades of golden fire, he made a decision that shocked the entire tribe. He told them of a hidden reservoir on the far side of his ranch, a deep, clean spring fed by an underground river, water enough to sustain a whole valley if channeled properly, and he offered it freely, without condition, knowing full well that giving it up meant surrendering his last tie to the life he once knew. At first,
Disbelief rippled through the women, then suspicion, then awe.
"Why would a man give away the one thing that keeps him alive?" an elder finally asked, and Elias answered with raw honesty, "Because you gave me something far more valuable first.
You gave me a place in the world."
His voice cracked, but he did not waver, and that simple confession struck the tribe with the force of thunder. Many wept openly, and even Ahalani's unshakable composure broke as she placed a hand over his heart and whispered that no man had ever honored them with such sincerity. They worked together in the days that followed, carving narrow channels, moving stones, and guiding the water toward the struggling valley until at last a thin ribbon of clear, shimmering life flowed across the soil, soaking roots, filling troughs, and bringing the land back from the brink. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Elias had imagined, music rising into the night sky, fires glowing like scattered stars, and dozens of warm,
grateful voices calling his name with affection. That made his chest ache.
He had expected to remain an outsider forever, but instead he became something else entirely, a symbol of hope, a reminder that compassion could cross borders that history had carved in stone, and most unexpectedly, a man cherished by every woman whose life he had touched. When Ahalani announced before the whole tribe that Elias was no longer a captive but a welcomed member of the Daughters of the Dawn, a brother, a protector, and a heart among their hearts, the cheering shook the valley walls, and Elias felt a rush of belonging so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. But the moment that changed him most came later that night, when Naira approached him beneath the moonlit cliff, her eyes reflecting the water he had helped restore, and told him softly that he had given them more than survival. He had reminded them that not all bonds are built by blood or heritage, some are born from kindness strong enough to bridge worlds. Standing there, surrounded by the warm glow of fires, listening to laughter echo through the reborn valley, Elias realized something profound. He had spent years believing he was a man destined to walk alone, yet these women, fierce and tender and resilient, had taken his loneliness and reshaped it into connection, purpose, and love of the purest kind, not romantic love alone, but the love of community, acceptance, and shared heartbeats. And as dawn finally touched the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of rose and gold, Elias understood that he had not been captured at all. He had been found, healed, and cherished by a tribe who saw in him what he had forgotten to see in himself. In that gentle morning light, surrounded by the women whose strength shaped the valley and whose kindness shaped him, Elias felt the truth settle into his soul like a warm ember: compassion, freely given, bravely offered, and humbly received, could change not just one life but an entire world, and the heart that once wandered alone had finally discovered its home.